Hey everyone, my name is Rachel Zanes. I'm the Vice President for Communications for the Link Learning Alliance. We are so pleased to welcome you all here today. Very quickly before we get into our just a jam-packed webinar full of good content, I wanted to just go over some very quick housekeeping rules. Just note that everyone is muted upon entering the event, and we ask that you stay on mute unless you are called on or you're a speaker. We are also going to be recording this event so that we can share it with folks who may have not been able to join at this time. And we are really wanting you guys to all engage as much as possible. So there are two ways to do that. If you're joining by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute or unmute yourself. And then the primary way that we're hoping folks can engage is through the chat function. So we've got Link Learning Alliance staff who are monitoring that chat function throughout the event. And we'll have some facilitated dedicated times for Q&A. So you can just enter your question in there and it'll be elevated in front of the group or it will be addressed in the chat function. If you are having any technical difficulties or have any questions, please message Maya Libes from our team. She is the one who's going to be kind of moderating and monitoring the chat box. We also, if you are having any issues hearing or your internet is going slowly, please just, we recommend turning off your camera. That often helps, or you can always dial in by phone if it continues to be problematic. And here you'll see those quick housekeeping rules. And then we also wanted to just make sure that engagement is happening throughout the event. So please, if you could take a second right now, introduce yourself in the chat box, your organization, your role. And of course, if you are on social media, please follow along as we amplify the conversation on Twitter and on Instagram, and be sure to use the hashtag #LinkedLearning. So with that, I will hand things over to my colleague, Ronita Guha, to kick things off.
Great, thanks so much, Rachel. And hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on empowering youth in civic action. Thank you to all of you for joining us this afternoon. As Rachel mentioned, I'm Ronita Guha, Vice President for Strategy and Impact at the Link Learning Alliance. And for those of you unfamiliar with Link Learning, it's a framework for transforming educational systems by integrating college and career preparation. And as a longtime education researcher, I lead our work to build strategic partnerships and develop the evidence base for Link Learning to fuel this national movement that is now serving over 250,000 students in 20 states and counting. So much like we're doing here today, the Link Learning Alliance brings educators together as a community of practice. We amplify the voices of students and educators to ensure that decision makers understand their aspirations for a better future. And I'm joined by my colleague, Dan Storrs, Senior Director for K-12 Engagement, who's going to help facilitate today's webinar. The Link Learning Alliance is spotlighting civic engagement in Link Learning pathways throughout the month of October. In this time of a pandemic and the movement for racial equity and justice, Link Learning pathways are so well positioned to encourage young people to develop the self-agency and motivation to vote, to hold leaders accountable, and to keep advocating for themselves and their communities. And so today we're so thrilled to highlight the work of Link Learning students, educators, and community partners from Oakland Unified School District who are leading efforts to advance social justice and racial equity in their community through action civics projects and coursework tied to the industry theme of their pathway. Dan, I'm going to turn it to you.
Thanks, Ronita. Today, you'll learn how integrated college and career pathway design fosters academically rigorous, student-centered projects that provide young people with opportunities to dive deeply into a real-world topic or issue of their choice. Develop the research, analysis, writing, and oral presentation skills needed for post-secondary success, and prepare them to engage in lifelong civic discourse and action. Specifically, you will observe an example of a student-led project and presentation developed and conducted during distance learning. Obtain tools, resources, and strategies for designing high-quality project-based learning with an action civics focus in a Link Learning pathway. Learn how educators can engage community partners to provide an authentic and relevant experience for students. And finally, to reflect on the role of civic engagement and student voice and the role that they play in Link Learning. Ronita?
Thanks, Dan. And as obviously critical election approaches and our communities face both challenges and opportunities, Link Learning educators are innovating to bring relevance and coherence to the entire learning experience to prepare all students to fully participate and shape civic, cultural, and economic life. And so how are educators doing this? Especially as students continue to learn from home, one answer lies in well-designed projects. And as many of you here know, meaningful, relevant projects are essential to integrating pathway core content with career technical education and work-based learning. helping to bridge that gap between community and students. And project-based learning continues to be a critical aspect of linked learning during this time. Students have found project-based learning especially essential during distance learning. We did a survey of 1,400 juniors and seniors across 7 linked learning districts, which showed that young people highly valued core linked learning practices like peer collaboration, project-based learning, and portfolio defenses during this really challenging time. So that connection is really important. So as a reminder, the project you're going to see today represents just one step in a student's learning journey. The students you're going to hear from are exercising skills and competencies they will continue to develop throughout their high school career and beyond. And so now I'd like to introduce you to an amazing and accomplished team of educators from Oakland Unified School District. We have Youngwon Choi, the manager of performance assessments, Cameron Frederick, career technical education coach, Mallory Logan, a career technical education teacher from the Law and Social Justice Academy at Oakland High School, and Tatiana Newman-Wade, the work-based learning liaison who's been working with them. And Youngwon, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Youngwon Choi with Oakland Unified. I wanted to start with this slide of our graduate profile. You can see the 5 traits that we are looking for in all of our graduates, one of which is directly relevant to today's session, and that is community leadership. And I want to start with this because the work of developing community leaders actually began a long time before our graduate profile. This is a new profile from this past year, but the work of really developing a system-wide approach to community leadership and civic action has been in the making for many years. In my quick overview today, I want to highlight 2 conditions that I think have been essential to allowing us to have a district approach to civic action. And one is the growth of pathways. So you can see over the last 5 years, our enrollment numbers for 10th, 11th, and 12th graders have increased from 53% in 2015 all the way to 85% in this past school year. And what's really important about this, in addition to just the fact that we're providing more linked learning opportunities to students, is what this means for the adult relationships. And I think this is something that's under highlighted when it comes to linked learning pathways, is that one of the powers of being in a linked learning pathway is the fact that you're working with adults towards a common vision at a scale that's manageable. And so you can really collaborate on a vision, you can work together in a way that you wouldn't be able to do at the scale of a large comprehensive school. The other key condition that I think has been important in our district is that in our graduate capstone project, traditionally we had expected a research paper and oral presentation. And recently we've been moving, and teachers have been moving to including a civic action project that's based on a pathway theme as one of the key components of our graduate capstone project. And that plus the fact that teachers are working together in these pathways has been the I think the 2 factors that have really led to powerful civic action experiences to happen across a student's high school experience. Because when you start with a civic action project as the end goal, as we have in our capstone project, and the fact that all teachers are working together, and you can go to the next slide, it encourages people who teach 10th and 11th grade to say, well, I want my students to be successful on that capstone project. So what do I need to teach as a 10th and 11th grade teacher? Well, I'm going to teach research, I'm going to teach oral presentation, I'm going to teach civic action, if civic action is indeed part of the end expectation for all students. And so you'll see today an example of a pathway where the 10th and 11th grade team was seeing what students were expected to do in their senior year, and they've developed a project-based learning unit that does incorporate civic action. The other thing I think that's been essential towards supporting civic action in our district is that we have a 9th grade elective course in ethnic studies that's required in most of our high schools, and students do an action project as part of that. So over the course of 4 years, students aren't just getting one opportunity to do civic action, but multiple opportunities to build their skills, their knowledge, and their dispositions along the way. The final thing I'll say real quickly is that I don't need to convince anybody here. I think that civic action is absolutely critical to our democracy, but we also have a study from our 2015 work around civic engagement that showed that students who had high exposure to civic action were 2 times more likely to say schoolwork is interesting, that they were engaged in challenging tasks, and they got to make important decisions. And these are all critical indicators of engagement and high school graduation. And so civic engagement and civic action is not just important for democracy, which it is, but it's also deeply valuable to the student experience in school. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Cameron Frederick. And she's a CTE coach that's been supporting the Law and Social Justice Pathway, and she's going to introduce the project.
Thanks for that, Youngwon. Yes, so like you said, I'm Cameron Frederick. I'm a CTE coach that supports law and public service pathways here in Oakland. And today I'm presenting as part of our Oakland High School Law and Social Justice Academy team. And I'm going to give you a little bit of context of the project before I turn it over to our teacher, work-based learning liaison, and students to really show you the nuts and bolts of the project. So the project, this Reimagining Public Safety project, is definitely a response to the national defund the police movement that has been happening during the summer and in conjunction with the larger movement for Black Lives. And particular for those of you outside of Oakland, just a little context, there was a lot of community organizing and community demand for a response to defunding the Oakland Police Department this summer. In response to that, our Oakland City Council in July decided to form this task force to reimagine public safety. And that task force began meeting in September. And so students, this project you're going to hear about involves students researching alternatives to the police for a whole range of issues, running the gamut from what is the appropriate response for mental health crises, to traffic stops, to nuisance calls, with the idea that they're going to present their proposals to this Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, which will then present to the Oakland City Council in the spring recommendations for how to defund the Oakland Police Department by 50% and instead reinvest that money into initiatives that the community believes will actually make people feel safe. So that is the context of this project you're going to hear about. While we present, we're hoping, it was great to see so many people here from law academies and social science teachers. We're hoping to give you a really concrete way in the midst of this distance learning pandemic that we're facing to still engage students in real-time racial justice issues through high quality PBL. As well as we'll emphasize how we really engaged and relied on community partners to make this project real and meaningful. So first, I'll set some context. I'll turn it over to Mallory to tell you the sort of teacher planning side of the project. You'll hear from Tatiana how she engaged partners. Then you'll hear from some of the actual partners involved with the work. And finally, the best part, we have students here to present their actual work to you. So a little bit of context, this project was done as part of an 11th grade CTE course on policy and justice that again is part of the Law and Social Justice Academy that's just in its third year in existence. I think in the larger context of Oakland being in its sixth year of implementing linked learning pathways across the district. And so this particular pathway has a 10th grade CTE course with a focus on community organizing, youth in the law, then 11th grade with a focus on policy, legislative advocacy, criminal justice reform, leading up to a 12th grade course that is more of a focus on law and legal advocacy. So I'm going to go over a few of our ways that we define high quality PBL in Oakland. And this is largely inspired by Buck Institute and High Tech High and lots of other great project-based learning implementers across the country, but also really draws from the Oakland ethnic studies lens and civic engagement lens. So you can check out our 9 elements here. And I won't spend too much time on this, but I'll just sort of highlight that I think this project really reflects an authentic project responding to a real community need with an actual authentic need for youth voice. It certainly gave students a lot of voice and choice, both in what types of community issues they wanted to focus on and how they wanted to collect their research. It's a very challenging problem that nobody has an actual detailed solution to at this point. So it's really engaging them in real work. And it was very collaborative. Students worked in groups from 3 to 5 to come up with their proposals. And I think something that we've learned over and over again is just how important having an authentic public audience is for really motivating students to produce high quality work. And so having the actual reimagining public safety task force and the Oakland City Council be the audience for this work was really, really an important driver. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mallory to tell you from the teacher perspective how she planned and implemented this project.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mallory Logan, and I teach in the Law and Social Justice pathway at Oakland High. So a couple of things kind of about the project. Thinking about the events of the summer, right? I really wanted students to see and to be involved in kind of what's next in terms of the movement and what's happening. And because this is a policy class that focuses on local and state issues, I wanted them to look at the policy demands, like Cameron said, that have been happening for years locally, and to give students kind of a tangible way for them to get involved, but also so their voices could be heard, because I think they do have a really vital and valid perspective when it comes to their community. And so with the task force, it kind of presented a perfect opportunity for them to share their ideas. So as far as like the project overview, the main kind of thing was them creating a proposal for an alternative police response, right? So they would research whether they wanted to focus on mental health calls or gender violence calls. So they all had choice when it came to what idea or what response they were going to look at. And two of the bigger research pieces came from them. They did a community survey. So this was really important for me, is for them to be able to go out and kind of see what their community wants, their friends and family, what they want and need in terms of safety, right? And also, would their community be open to an alternative response to policing? So kind of getting information from the ground up for them, but also then using secondary research to look at other programs across the country, as far as like, what are those alternative programs that already exist and how could they adapt those? So those are kind of the three like major pieces for them creating their proposals to present to our city council members. So the key deliverables, the first thing they really worked on was their survey. And I would say the foundational piece was their written outline. This is where they put all of their research kind of into that, and they worked on that document collaboratively. And then the slide deck, the policy brief, infographic, their presentations, and their advocacy letters were all based on that one written outline of their proposal. So it's kind of a step-by-step process for them, so they didn't get too overwhelmed in the distance learning context. We only had a 9-week quarter this year for this class, so there were opportunities, and there's opportunities keep coming in for them to present their work. So now we're trying to figure out how can they continue to present their work when they're not in class. So as far as the project timeline, I'm originally a history teacher. So the first 3 weeks, I really wanted them to kind of have an understanding of like, what are the origins of policing in this country? What is the history of policing? And also looking at the different reform movements that have happened over time. As well as, again, I really like to focus on like local and city politics. And what's the role of the city council in our community, right? Why is it important? Why is it just as important as like our state and national elections? And week 4, we had council members Taylor and Bass come in, and those were the 2 people who created the task force. So the students prepped questions for them. And so I think it was really good to have insight from the people who were kind of leading this movement, or as far as the government goes, leading this movement here in Oakland. Weeks 5 through 7, that's where they did a lot of their heavy lifting. They developed a survey, they did all their research, and they developed all of their deliverables in these 3 weeks. So there was a lot of work built into those 3 weeks. And then the last 2 weeks is where they kind of finalized their presentations, and they did a recorded presentation to send out to Councilmember Taylor's office, because they were going to give feedback to them. And then they also wrote an advocacy letter to each of their city council members. So that's kind of the overview of the timeline. So as far as student work, I think this should be shared, but they're all examples of everything that they produced. The slide deck, the infographic, policy brief. So hopefully each like skill set within the groups could be highlighted, right? If some people didn't like talking, maybe they're more creative, they could do the infographic. So try to kind of give each person something that they could like really succeed at. So I think one of the most important things, and the students said when I gave them a survey of like how class was going, was a weekly document that I would post everything that was happening for the whole week. It would be all the resources they needed, as well as all like the dates, the deliverables, the directions. So they got that every week and they kind of knew what was happening. But also a lot of my students work or are taking care of like siblings. So a lot of times they can't make class. So this also gives them a document to reference throughout the week if they miss class. So I do have a lot of reflections and a lot of things that would definitely be tweaked. And ideally this would have been an integrated project with English and US history, but those are meeting this quarter and they were not meeting the previous quarter. I went back and forth between live and recorded presentations. I thought if I had them record them, that would be easy to kind of disseminate. But then also the live presentations, I feel like even worked better. And we just recorded those. There was not a lot of time for feedback or revision. So they kind of just like jumped headfirst into a lot of their the stuff that they presented and created. And I think because they had an authentic audience and they knew it wasn't just me looking at their work, that they were that they really did a great job. I was really impressed with a lot of their work. And I think it's also because, you know, their voices, they felt like their voices were getting heard and their perspective was being shared. It's something that's like really impacted them and continues to impact them to this day when it comes to police violence in our community. And I will say, me and Tatiana, who I'll hand it off to next, that we kind of came in this year. She usually will get the guest speakers to come in and stuff, but we thought, well, maybe because it's Zoom, we don't have to worry about like people's schedules and they can just show up. So I do think there are certain advantages of Zoom class and having people who are generally really busy and can't like leave to show up to these types of events. So having the community, having APTP show up and having our council members show up was really great. And I think that was an advantage. There's not a lot of advantages, but we tried to take advantage of the one we did with the Zoom classes. And so I will hand it off to Tatiana, who I really could not really probably do this without. She is in charge of she helps kind of get all these important people to come talk to our students and hear their work. So I will pass it off to her.
All right. Hi, I'm Tatiana Newman Wade. I'm the work-based learning liaison for Oakland High School. And I'll just share a little bit more with you on how I do get awesome people to come and engage with our students. I primarily work with our CTE teachers to enhance their curriculum with work-based learning. It's definitely a collaborative process in which we meet at the beginning of the semester, or in this case, the quarter. And I review their curriculum. And from there, we decide what community partners we want to bring in to create our work-based learning experiences. Sometimes the teachers may have specific partners in mind. Other times, I might suggest a partner based on what they're learning and previous partnerships that we've had that have been strong. This particular partnership, as you heard from Mallory, we did select the Anti-Police Terror Project because they have been leading the charge in this work for the past 5 years. In addition to that, of course, we selected council members Taylor and Fortunato Bass because they're the co-chairs for the Reimagining Safety Task Force. We had a relationship with the chief of staff for Nikki Fortunato Bass's office. Her name is Maya Chin. Originally, I connected with her to support project-based learning in our Environmental Science Academy. And she was so awesome. We stayed in touch, and she volunteered throughout the year for other work-based learning activities. And when we formed our advisory board for the Law and Social Justice Academy, we invited her to participate as well. So we knew that when this opportunity came up to reach out to her. In general, when I connect with public officials, state and local, I usually reach out to either their chief of staff, like Maya, or their schedulers. Schedulers always know when there's some availability, and public officials are more than willing to give their time and their wisdom to young people. And just as much as they're willing to give their wisdom, they really love getting the wisdom from the young people because that informs their work. And I've had a lot of success in doing so, in getting various public officials like Assembly Member Rob Bonta, as well as Senator Nancy Skinner for our Law and Social Justice Academy as well. One more thing is to increase the chances of them coming in the initial acts that I do. I usually will reach out via email, and I follow up with a phone call, but I make sure to give them optional dates, at least 2 options of dates and times that may work with their schedule. In addition to that, I make sure to ask well in advance, no less than 2 weeks in advance. I usually like to ask 1 to 2 months, if not more in advance, just to make sure we can secure them. And that we also provide them with a preparation document once they have confirmed their participation, to make sure that they're aware of the agenda, sample questions that students may ask them, and I give them specific topics to cover with students, even in order of how they should, what they should be talking about. In addition to that, of course, how to relate to students, right? Different tips. For example, give specific examples and stories about the work that you do, right? Don't talk in broad terms. Give a concrete example, something that people can would enjoy. In addition to that, like being mindful about not using acronyms like RN or HR, because a lot of students don't really know what those are. So just those type of things, so they have a better time connecting with our students. And then, of course, following up after the presentation or whatever type of engagement we've had, to give them a thank you, and just to get the ball rolling with what are our next steps. In this particular project, our next steps were them viewing the actual student projects, which they have done, and moving forward, our students presenting at an actual safety task force meeting. So I think I've covered everything. I'm going to hand it back over to Mallory.
All right, so here I think is the most important part is I'm going to have 3 of my students. They're going to present their presentation that they did on an alternative to police response. So Brooklyn Brooks, Anaya Story, and Jasmine Bowe.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anaya Story. Hi, I'm Brooklyn Brooks.
Hi, everyone. I am Jasmine Bowe.
And I also want to recognize that our classmates Peter and Eulogio couldn't be here today, but they are a very important part of this project, and we are all students. We're all juniors in the Law and Social Justice pathway. Can we get the next slide, please?
The problem now. We see a lot of police officers who do not know how to act when they have an emergency related to mental health. They need more training in this. Not just that, but professionals who take care of emergencies that police cannot. We have evidence about police officers' use of brutality or unnecessary force in cases where a mental health professional, like a social worker, could take action in a better way. Introduction: major issues and challenges of police response in Oakland. What is wrong with the current police response in Oakland? They don't have proper training to respond to issues such as homelessness and mental health crises. Often called for mental health emergencies and don't have the right resources. They use excessive/deadly force. And take too long to respond to calls/emergencies. And over here on the graph, it shows the, we get to the right, the bar graph shows how long it takes when police are responding to mental health crises. Why do we need an alternative response? Police aren't trained to handle mental health crises safely, and police receive a lot of calls and need more assistance responding to them. So overall, mental health emergencies would just be better solved without police's help. Student perspective. I feel we are bringing a perspective of youth that are seriously concerned about our community and its future due to the way that policing has negatively impacted our city. Our insight matters because we as young people don't often get a chance to voice our opinion. So with us processing how we feel and getting a deeper understanding on policing while being able to put our thoughts into a project is very important when people don't expect this or used to seeing it happen.
Cool. So as the next part of our project, we end up conducting research, and we actually conducted a survey. So here we want to show you the survey results. So the demographics of people who answered to our surveys. Again, we conducted a research by looking at different surveys and coming up with questions that all citizens could and felt comfortable answering. And also we made it so we can get the most accurate results. So the major demographics that surveyed were 58.4% female and 40.8% male. The highest race surveys were Asian, Hispanic, and Blacks. And also the age group who took the survey were mostly ages between 14 to 17 years old. And to the right, we have the two biggest zip codes that were that answer were mainly from 94606, which is the east of Lake Merritt before Fruitvale, and also to 94601, which is Fruitvale, Fremont, East Oakland. Cool. So the question it asks us is, what were our community's major attitudes, priorities, and needs? And also, what did it show us about how residents feel about the OPD, or the Oakland Police Department? More than 58% shown to the left of residents from Oakland feel neutral about the OPD. The other half are majority of residents who have negative experience, 24%, 24% specifically, or very negative, 8.4% feeling towards the OPD. And also there was a little, 8.9% specifically, residents who felt positive about the OPD. This is also another visual of how residents feel safe in their neighborhoods. 46.7%, which is the orange representing the graph, feel sometimes safe. 37.9% feel safe, and the other blue slit of the not the paragraph, excuse me, the graph, 9.1, were very safe. Second question that we came across was, what are the biggest challenges to safety? The biggest challenges to safety are making sure everyone's needs are prioritized and making sure we have the proper funding for their needs. Things our residents said that must have needs in terms of safety are homeless services, which is 79%, 79.7%, youth services, mental health services, as well as reliable housing, And also people said that they will feel comfortable with other services handling social emergency calls other than the police. And again, here's more of a visual of what other people said they would like to see in their neighborhood. They also said community centers and programs, 72.4% specifically, also improved street lighting and sidewalks, as well as job training services and youth services as well. So here were our major takeaways from conducting our research. Most people feel safe in their community and their opinion of police is overall neutral. But it's also still an important factor that 32% of residents in Oakland had a negative or very negative view of OPD. Also, the funding of policing can be changed and used to be help different things in their community, such as, again, community centers and programs, homeless services, better streetlights, reliable housing, and etc. And also, the evidence showed us that people want to cut the police budget, but are open to group alternatives to answering police calls. And also, the evidence just shows overall that people just want to see a change in their neighborhood, and also that will help benefit them in the future.
So we're proposing an alternative response to mental health crises. Our goal is to decrease and eventually abolish police response to mental health crises and invest in alternative response teams with trained professionals who will properly address mental health emergencies. So some of the key elements and features in this program would first be alternative first responders to mental health crises instead of the police. And this is because police don't know how to respond to these types of crises and often result in excessive or deadly force. This team would rely on medics and crisis workers, and these workers would have several years of experience before even taking part in this program. So this team would include people with the necessary skill set to handle different types of mental health situations. Safety is always the #1 priority. So experienced medical professionals such as nurses and EMTs would make sure to approach these situations to make sure everything is safe and comfortable to the people they're responding to. And that means no violent tactics will be used. That means team members will not carry any weapons, no use of excessive or deadly force. And this is all to make sure that the approach is therapeutic and not punitive. So these services would be 24/7, and they would include emergency response to mental health emergencies, counseling, and these services would be 100% free. And there'll also be a hotline in addition to in-person services. And this program would decrease the amount of calls the police have to respond to, which would allow them to respond to other situations such as violent crime. And so how would we implement this program? Team members would first go through a series of training to make sure that they're fully equipped with the proper skills they need to approach emergencies. And the following trainings would be crisis counseling to make sure that they know how to approach these situations, creating safe spaces to make sure that the person they're responding to is safe and comfortable, and behavioral health, which is for them to make sure that they're in the proper headspace to respond to situations like these. Mental health calls would be transferred to the program through 911, and they can also call through the hotline, and then a team would then go out and respond. So the budgets. So this program would need around $2 million to make sure there's enough materials and resources. That would include vans for transportation, and as well as resources which would include trainings and everything else they need. And these funds would come out of the police budget. And that's because the program would now be assisting the police by taking responsibility for mental health response. And it's also known that the police are overfunded and they do not know how to respond to mental health crises. So as you can see, this chart on, can I have the last slide, please? Thank you. On the chart to the right, it shows the police budget in comparison to everything else in Oakland, and it's overwhelmingly high. I'll now pass it over to Jasmine.
Cool, thanks, Naya. So they asked us, was this an adapted or original idea? Yes, this was an adapted idea from the program called Cahoots. Cahoots was originated in Eugene, Oregon, and have been running for for more than 30 years now, excuse me. And they believe it will be more effective if different type of specialists would answer first response calls rather than the police in these cases. So how this can be adapted to Oakland and what changes or adaptation we need adaptation adaptation would be to be made. So yes, we see this being adapted for Oakland by allowing these type of specialists, such as mental health therapists and social workers, and etc., to be the first responders and de-escalators to mental health crises, since the majority of calls are involved with mental health. We don't believe there should be any changes made because the program has been successful since then and would be a great new addition to our community in Oakland. And before, I also would really love to advocate and acknowledge the APTP, or the Anti-Police Terror Project, who are currently doing this work right now. Besides, COVID guidelines, they're actually updating and they just need the proper funding. So once everything dies down, you will see them out there and ready. So why does our group believe in this idea? Our group believes in this idea because we've researched some of Kahoot's successes in the past and believe this will be a great idea and will be very beneficial to mentally ill residents in our community who have negative experiences and traumas from the police. And also our community feels so much safer and happier to see this reform in place. And I'll pass it back to Brooklyn.
Impact in Oakland. Why would this proposal work in Oakland? This alternative could work well in Oakland because it suits the needs of the city. In the survey results we saw, we can see how people are concerned about mental health and are not comfortable with the police too. This idea is an excellent alternative to 911 cases such as suicide attempts, substance abuse, mental breakdowns, or some emergencies where prepared response teams can help more than police. How does this idea meet the needs of Oakland in terms of safety? We can find several cases around the Bay Area that informed us of the lack of training that the police received when they responded to a mental health emergency. This idea implements a professional response team where protect is the main idea. Its purpose is to calm the situation and provide help to those who need it.
So how does our proposal relate to the survey results? So a lot of people don't feel safe around the police, and a lot of people actually want an alternative to 911. So this program would be a great option for Oakland in terms of safety. And many people are concerned about mental health. This coupled with discontent that the police cause, we need to bring more alternatives to improve the quality of security and safety in this city. So how does it actually solve issues of policing? If we have an alternative for police, or in this case, just a safer option for emergencies, this could actually reduce policing because 1 in 4 police killings happen to mentally ill people. So they would not only be this would not be the only option, they would not be the only option in case of an emergency.
Well, and again, how does this improve equity in Oakland? This program is not made to overwatch nor police people at all. It is just it is it is just made to help and respond, pretty much overall. We just really care about our community, and I feel like right now the police are not properly trained to do so. So we just want to provide them with the right resources and help. So here is our conclusion for what we learned.
What did we learn? I learned that the more I researched police and came up with alternatives to help change them, the more active I want to be in my community as a youth leader. And seeing the results on the survey just shows that people have some similar things they want to see change in their community.
I learned that you don't always need the police to handle every type of situation and that there are always safer alternatives.
One of our group mates, Peter, unfortunately he wasn't able to come today to present, but he said that he learned that about the needs and what people want, You also learn that how the program we are investing works and why its implementation will be very beneficial to Oakland. And what I learned was that we do need better alternatives to our first responders because our police officers are not properly trained to handle these kind of situations, and not everyone's needs are our priorities. And that is the end of our presentation.
Yay.
Give a round of applause virtual applause to the students.
All right, yeah, thank you very much. That was wonderful. We're going to move to questions now. And so I want to encourage everyone to ask questions, give comments in the chat. They did such a wonderful job, and everybody, educators too, put a lot into this, and I would surely would welcome your questions and comments. So to get started, I'll throw out a question for the students. How has your experience working on this project influenced how you see your role as a young person in the community and in civic life? Specifically, can you see yourself engaged in civic actions now or in the future? And do you think that after this experience that young people can make a difference? I know, Jasmine, you might want to start, and anybody can jump in terms of your story with this.
Yes, sir, of course. I mean, honestly, I believe that students are, the next generation of our future, obviously, that will create a change. How I've been getting involved, and I really encourage others to get involved too. I'm a part of this club called Californians for Justice at our school. And right now, we are really advocating and promoting people, and also encouraging voters right now to vote yes on Prop 15. So I've been doing a lot of public service announcements of collaborating with EBASI, or the East Bay Asian Youth Center, and also just been helping out with implicit bias trainings along with Anaya with these for teachers in Oakland, also throughout the state. So that's what I've been doing pretty much, and that's taking up most of my time right now. But yes, I do highly encourage a whole bunch of youth to take civic action because honestly, it's been too long, and we can't just sit here and wait, right? Waiting for these people in power to do this or these elected officials to do that. It's our time, to step up and create a change and put these in front of their faces. Like, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to get done because honestly, we haven't seen a change in so long. So that's what I need to see.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, just like Jasmine, I am part of Californians for Justice, or CFJ, where we worked on implicit bias trainings, excuse me, for OUSD's teachers. I'm also a commissioner on the Oakland Youth Advisory Commission, where we like to, center youth voice. We actually just held a candidate forum where we got the school board candidates and the city council candidates who are running. And we invited a whole bunch of youth to listen to them and ask them a question so that we can hold our leaders accountable and see what plans they have for youth. And I think doing projects like this really just show us, as well as myself, that youth do have a voice, that you don't have to wait for someone to do it for you, or that just because you're young doesn't mean people aren't going to listen to you. And I feel like that's a misconception a lot of people have about this generation, that we're just going to sit here and do nothing. And that's not the truth. We want to see change happen because what we do, what we plan is what's going to affect us. So that's a really big part for me.
Well, I'm not a part of anything, but doing this project, like I said in my conclusion, it makes me want to be more active in my community because I already am active. I talk about it a lot with my family at home, and Miss Logan has really just been opening my mind to a lot of things because I don't typically get to speak up, and I just feel like all youth in general shouldn't be afraid, like Anaya and Jasmine both said, because we all are leaders and we all have a voice.
That's terrific, and that's a great lesson. So obviously you guys haven't wasted time being involved, and just a great lesson is you just expressed, Brooklyn, in terms of feeling that you can do it, and that's powerful right there. So how is your experience in the Law and Social Justice Academy and doing this project help you make decisions about what you want to do after high school. Have you thought about that?
Yes, I love this pathway, and I really mean that. I feel like before coming into the pathway, I kind of had like my mind was all over the place in terms of what I wanted to do after high school. But coming into this pathway and just learning about, different ways young people can be advocates, or, just working on this project in Miss Logan's class has really just told me like I need to be working in my community. I want to be a lawyer, and I know that for sure. I know that this is where I belong. So that's definitely helped me, like I'm not sure if solidify is the right word, but it's definitely helped me like, choose what I want to do. Like I have a better idea of what I want to do.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to just for time, I'm going to move on and kind of talk to the educators a little bit, but I want to thank the three of you again for your just thoughtful and impressive work that you've done, and for taking the time to kind of participate and share today. All right, and we are going to move to the educator portion and talk for a few minutes with the educators. And let's start. We had a couple questions. Actually, I'm just going to go to the chat. There was one question asking of the teachers that how did you manage or monitor the research that is required to complete a project like this?
So I really leaned on Google Classroom and just shared Google Docs. So the students would work on one document together and they would just share it with me. And that way I could keep up with with the feedback that I wanted to give them when it came to their research outline. That was really, the research outline was really the only thing that I super focused on in terms of giving feedback and grading, because everything else was based upon it. And I didn't necessarily have time for the other like remaining elements. So just kind of having them share their work with me as they do it, and then I could kind of check it as they moved along.
Great, thanks. And there was a question earlier also in the chat, which you kind of answered in the chat, but I think it's worth kind of bringing up for folks. And that was about, and I think it's particularly important now, and I feel like in public discourse, a lot of it's like talking at people and not really talking to each other. And so from the educator's perspective, as you set this up, what kinds of things did you do to ensure that students were able to really kind of examine all sides, different perspectives through their work?
I think starting out and just kind of looking at some of the historical facts of like policing in the United States and where it came from and how it evolved, but also looking at like the different reform movements that have happened essentially since the 1920s. And I think kind of coming at it with the perspective, we can all agree that like policing in the United States needs reform. And so looking at the ways that people have asked for that, and then kind of moving into like, what are the specific things happening locally so the students could get involved. As far as like the perspective of the police, we didn't necessarily have time for that. And I am wary of bringing the police into my classroom. I've done it before and I've kind of gone against that, but I did give them the extra credit assignment. There's a documentary on OPD called The Force, and so that was part of their extra credit assignment. But for me, it was really just focusing on the policy proposals and like what are people demanding in Oakland. Yeah.
And I think that just the research that they did in terms of even the surveys, show that they really, it wasn't just about clearly that they had an opinion and wanted to share it, that they went out there and got a diverse set of opinions. So it was great. So I think we might have time for one more question perhaps, and then we'll kind of move on. And I want to talk a little bit about how did the linked learning structure help facilitate implementing a project like this?
I would say it's like kind of like a team aspect, right? There's no way I feel like I could have done this like just me in like in my like isolated classroom. Having Cameron, who is our CTE coach, who works like with the linked learning office in OUSD, having Tatiana, so having all these different people that could kind of like take a little bit of the load from me is super helpful, as well as having like the students have skills that I know that were built in 10th grade that I know I didn't necessarily have to cover. They've done public speaking. So I didn't necessarily feel like I had to like super emphasize those things because I know what they've done in the 10th grade and I know kind of what we're building towards. So I think it's like the best way to teach. I really love this model that we have in Oakland for that.
Great. All right. Thanks very much. I'm going to turn it to Renita and the industry partner panel.
Sure. And again, thank you to the students and to the educators. Just really fantastic job. I want to welcome two folks who served as community partners for this project who were mentioned earlier. We have with us James Birch, Policy Director from the Anti-Police Terror Project, and Maya Chen, Chief of Staff for Councilmember Nikki Fortunato Bass from District 2 in Oakland. Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. We're so happy to have you here. Just wanted to ask a couple questions. Just first of all, why did you get involved with the project? And also just curious how your involvement was valuable to your organization or to you. And James, if you want to start, and then we could kick it to Maya after that.
For sure. I hope that everyone just heard what value this has to our organization with the brilliance that the youth share. As APTP, we think that youth engagement in public policy should be heavily encouraged and heavily resourced. And although we're a volunteer organization, we do everything we can to contribute to that effort. We feel like these students deserve to be active now and deserve a seat at the table, any table where we're discussing policy matters. And so we live that, that's our praxis. And so if there are tables we invite the youth and ensure that they're involved. And in processes like this, we try to give them as much information and opportunity as possible to come to their own conclusions about what public safety looks like. I think that there are plenty of systems that we need to transform as a society, and I'm sure we're all seeing that now. And so giving the youth as much as we can to kind of give them the responsibility to take leadership now will pay dividends forevermore.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, James. Maya?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's Mia.
Oh, sorry, Mia. I apologize.
It's an honor, and I'm just so inspired after hearing this amazing youth speak. So we're at this incredible political moment for young people to engage with local government right now. And I want to just thank the wonderful educators at Oakland High and OUSD for inviting Councilmember Bass and myself to join the Law and Social Justice Academy at Oakland High. And to discuss this task force to reimagine public safety in Oakland and reduce our police budget by $150 million. It's no small feat. This is an incredible journey that we're on. We are real time looking at different ways to invest in programs that address the root causes of violence, and community members demanded this change. Hundreds of people spoke out at council meetings, met with their representatives, and held them accountable. And here we are today. So Councilmember Bass engaged with the 11th grade students along with Councilmember Taylor, and she just loved it. She was energized after the meeting. She was hopeful about our future. And, you know, I think it's important just to remember that young people bring insights and creativity to the dialogue from their families and their own experiences that inform our work in local governments in really important ways. Especially for something like what we're doing right now in this task force, which has really never been done before in Oakland and most other places in our country, at least in my lifetime. And so they provided incredible just insights, research, data analysis for alternatives to policing, like you saw, for mental health assistance, gender-based violence, homelessness services, among others. And you know, their insights, experience, and work is just so important. And Oakland High is in the heart of our district, and we just really value their voice and their experience and their families.
Thank you so much, Mia. I know we only have one more minute, but I want to ask just one really important question of the two of you. What recommendations or strategies would you offer to other districts and pathways that are partnering with industry and community partners to ensure the partnership is mutually beneficial? How can we get, you know, how can educators get partners excited about working with young people?
Reach out directly. Reach out. I've had so many incredible things happen since the George Floyd uprising started, just because people emailed aptpinfo@gmail.com and started a conversation. I think the capacity to reach out and make things happen is difficult for organizations like ours. But if folks reach out and have laid the groundwork for an opportunity, we're more than happy to do our part of the bargain and create materials or present materials that provide value to the students.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just echoing James, bring a group of students to meet with your representative. This doesn't happen nearly enough. Tatiana is doing amazing work at Oakland High to just connect, connect local council members with the students and with the educators in the school. But I would say by and large, like City Hall, the people inside City Hall don't hear from young people enough. And they should be listening and they should be caring about what young people are saying, especially if they're in schools in their district. And they should be helping to set the priorities for the city and for their local elected. So, having someone who's tracking public meetings where the students can come testify, or building relationships with the staff of local elected officials to set up meetings and create opportunities to listen and engage and have constructive dialogue. I think those are super valuable, and your local representative should jump at an opportunity like that.
Thank you so much. All really great recommendations, and thank you both for joining us for today's session. In closing, I just want to thank you all and tell you about a few opportunities coming up for you to engage with the Alliance. We do have a couple of workshops coming up around pathway design and pathway continuous improvement, so please sign up for those. We also have a couple of webinars coming up in our fall webinar series. November 18th, we'll be hosting a webinar on attending to student supports and socio-emotional learning during COVID-19, followed by one in December on leveraging your Pathway Advisory Board. So we hope you can join us for those. We also encourage you to check out several resources from Oakland Unified to help you bring linked learning to life through project-based learning that connects students to community. You can find these links in the chat box, and we'll also be following up with a toolkit featuring these resources as well as a recording of the webinar. So to close, we just want to remind everyone that the Alliance team is ready to answer your questions and support you in your efforts to infuse civic action into your linked learning practice. Thank you for all you do. Together, we are moving closer to the day when all students have the ability to light their way to success in college, career, and life. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.